Hello, Ivy here. This week's podcast is entitled, What is the Endgame of UK Media? Episode 59. Introduction. This week's podcast examines the phenomenon of the growth of negative coverage of one person, which developed into an industry of hate, commencing with the odd person voicing concerns, and then groups, and two dysfunctional families to apparently a whole nation. All according to the UK printed and televised media industry. Most of the media industry personnel who have gone on to develop increased profile careers, wallowing in this cesspool of hatred, have never met the person who has become their target, and none of the groups which have emerged since 2016, when the target came to the attention of the UK population, particularly those who read tabloids, have not met the target either. Apparently, UK media speak for the whole country, as they like to run polls with very carefully worded questions, and where powerful aristocratic families have relatives in senior positions in the polling organisations used and publicised in the said tabloids. After 6 years of abuse, the last 2 of which have been conducted with the main target and her husband and family, now resident on another continent. It was bad enough when this abuse was done against a USA citizen on UK soil, and despite the rhetoric ordering the person concerned to go back to her own country almost every day, in front of camera and in print, the abusive behaviour and harassment has continued on USA soil. Why? For 4 years, the excuses related to the individual not adhering to unspoken protocol processes. And then it was about finding fault with every successful project undertaken, and achieved successes way beyond any other royal. Not least because all of the performance indicators were measurable and quantifiable in terms of achieving outcomes. This was unheard of in royal circles. Usually, lots of meaningless data is produced every year, which is clearly aimed at followers who never actually showed interest in real projects or real outcomes, so it follows that limited numbers of them actually scrutinised annual accounts. The fact that UK media have decided to continuously abuse the Sussexes, despite the fact that they stepped back from senior royal duties in 2020 and have been self-funding for the last 2 years. There is zero reason for UK media to continue this daily focus on Sussex activity, particularly the Duchess of Sussex. The Sussexes no longer work with UK royal reporters, so even though there is daily content in UK media publications and TV shows, none of it is based on fact. Many times it seems that the media in the UK try to goad the Sussexes to respond, not least because it drags out a story for many more articles, and therefore more money is earned from the drawn-out nonsense based on lies or assumptions or secret sources. The latter being pure fantasy, because the Sussexes made it known that they do not interact with any UK media, and the only statements about Sussexes activity that people need to take notice of is information coming out via the Sussexes communication team. Anything else is fantasy produced for clickbait. What possibly could all these people see, hear and read that has led to breaches in various aspects of the law? Some have been imprisoned, all of the groups who peddle in hatred of one person, and the subject's family earn vast sums of money peddling and encouraging hatred via social media platforms and via printed media with the clickbait income culture. And the advertisers who, if they had a conscience, put it on the back burner and enjoy the money making whilst it is happening. The printed media industry in particular was dying, and many publications have gone to that place where print media is buried. And now there is a revival of income. If the articles contain hate, or encourage hateful behaviour, and most of all, far more income is made if it contains their target. All those printed media have a dedicated tab on their front pages containing the names of their targets. The two targets are linked, likewise family members, but the main target for all the categories to focus on is one person. That is Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. One has to ask the question, why is all this time and energy being put into pursuing two individuals who are no longer working royals and who do not receive any public funds? They have purchased a home in another country, which is a strong indicator that they will not be returning to reside in the UK. So why all the focus on the couple, who all the media described as becoming irrelevant when they step back from royal duties? Because in doing so, it is telling the UK and the wider world that they regard the Sussexes as the subjects who bring in the most income. It is obvious that the UK royal family combined do not generate that level of interest in the UK, never mind outside of it. And in terms of earning power, there is no one within the British royal family who can generate the level of interest and income, and the whole British royal family combined still come nowhere near the level of income that the Sussexes bring in to media corporations and shareholders. It seems that anyone who dared question the relevance or even the activities of the UK royal family are suddenly pounced upon as if that is worthy or being regarded as a traitor. It seems that one is meant to bow down to anyone born into that family and never to question their activities or the value for money aspect of having a monarchy in the first place. It also seems that a proportion of the population are content to know that they are just there, and they believe all of the propaganda put out by associates of the British royal family, and at no point do any of these followers question their thinking process to accept all that is put in front of them regarding this institution, and to defend them to their last breath if anyone questions the point of it all. Even where there is credible information available about activities of certain family members going back decades, and before this current family were in post, there are centuries of activities that very few questioned, and when a few did, they felt the wrath of Team GB. There are so many instances of members of the British royal family, as well as many and associates of the family who have been proven guilty in so many heinous crimes, but no one questions the judgment of any royal who just happens to have a questionable approach to socialising with certain types, who have been proven less than worthy. Rarely a mention in the UK press, and if it is mentioned, it can be easily missed out most of the time. Such is the lack of prominence in the said media. Meanwhile, in Toxic City, where media folk reside, most of the time, let's talk about Duchess Meghan wearing black nail polish. Let's talk about the cost of her attire every time she steps out, and at the same time, keep quiet about the fact that Meghan was the only person in the royal family who was not allocated a budget for such items. The result was that Meghan paid for all these items herself, unlike any other senior female in that family, and did a grand job of representing the British royal family, but was chastised for it every day. no positive comments about any of the projects undertaken, and the outcomes or the income generated for the UK from all the things that Meghan wore on each and every visit. Royal reporters are only interested in talking about clothes of female members of the family, as they have no expectation of anything of substance. The difference with the male members of the British royal family, who equally had nothing of substance to offer, and certainly had not an iota of competence in designing and managing and running projects, let alone be able to discuss openly and answer questions about measurable outcomes, etc., there is never any discussion about the cost of their attire. Instead, the reach that royal reporters go to try and make their male subjects appear competent in something, other than reading from a crib sheet written by someone else, is a stretch beyond the imagination of anyone else but a royal supporter. The fact that a couple of them can read from a crib sheet better than all the rest is seen as a skill worthy of praise. Yet when a female comes in and writes her own speeches and delivers most of them without notes, and even where there is a teleprompter on hand, she does not have to stare at it at every second. The royal family had a gem in their midst, and due to fragile egos of others, they treated her like something under their shoes. I am confident that all that they reaped upon this member of the British royal family and her husband, the nation's favourite prince, will come to remind them one day of their wrongdoing. All the seeds of cruelty sown, and all the seeds of hatred put out there in the hemisphere, will be recorded in the history books on how a family used its propaganda arm without their being aware of international interest, and a change of thought processes underway. Or maybe it was seen by the British royal family as warfare against them, and in their way of doing things that justified the propaganda campaign that began in earnest in early 2017 and has not stopped, just merely changes methodology here and there. I do believe that the day will come when media personnel will be held personally responsible for the rhetoric they put out, verbally or in written form, and that they will cease to be protected by their employment status. Most of them are classed as self-employed anyway, and even where they are not, they make the decisions to do and say the things that have been done to a range of people, some of whom are no longer here to tell their story. I believe that the law has been breached in a number of areas, and one day those chickens will come home to roost. I hold certain members of the monarchy and UK media wholly responsible for the hate campaigns that have sprung up all over the UK, and within that framework the lone wolves type who have taken it upon themselves to follow the hunter and prey approach. The single-purpose targeted accounts set up online are there because people have been influenced by UK media. They need to be held responsible for the damage and harm done, and the encouragement of others to do the same, if not worse, if an opportunity presented itself. Newspaper barons won't be charged, that is for certain. So all those royal reporters who think they are safe to say and do the things that have been done since 2016 and is still being targeted across borders today to another continent. Just think on. If you believe your employer is going to be punished in any way for the deeds that you have all carried out, feeling confident that you are safe to do so, only the monarch is above the law, so there are a few others who think that they are immune, but they may well be in for a shock. What is the endgame here? UK media is at the forefront of all the hate that has been generated and all the groups that have been formed and all the organised bot farm contributors to social media single-purpose hate accounts. Regardless of the feeble claims of being impartial or that there is an agenda other than income generation, it is clear to all those of sane mind and vision as well as sight to see that there is a much wider spectrum of players in this 6-year hunter and prey game being played, and that the obvious amount of money and resources generally being placed on trying to destroy the Sussexes, even more so since they stepped back from royal duties, repaid work for renovation work on their rented cottage in Windsor, unlike any other royal who lives in Crown property, who have paid zero for roof renovations and any other part of their dwellings. Harry and Meghan were criticised in the press every week for all the public funds spent on a property that they were now planning to vacate in 2020. No matter that the £2.4 million for renovation work of this nature is included in the sovereign grant, just like all other Crown properties being rented out by other members of the royal family community. The Sussexes already paid for the internal improvements to the cottage to suit their tastes, but they were and remain the only ones who were asked to pay for structural repairs on the property. The cottage, by the way, was given as a supposed wedding present by the Queen. I think, in hindsight, I would have declined. The Sussexes surprisingly renewed the rental lease on the cottage in March 2022 and have offered, and it has been agreed, to pay the full market rent for such a property. So not even the royal reporters can complain about that, because there is no one in the royal family that pays market rent for any of the grace and favour properties which they all enjoy, and most of whom are not even working royals. So I ask the question again, why is a couple who are not high in the line of succession and who were vilified in the press daily to the tune of an average of over 100 articles a day between 4 to 5 tabloids, are still being hounded in this way, even though they are no longer working royals and they no longer reside in the UK? Other members of UK royalty with questionable activities, some of which point towards illegality, were left alone. The treatment of the Sussexes has been cruel and horrific in content and style, and led to suicidal ideations of the Duchess of Sussex, and still the abuse continues. The abuse continued when the couple moved to Canada and then on to the USA, and in that first year Meghan and Harry suffered a miscarriage. The content of the articles in UK media, in contrast to everywhere else in the world who reported on it, was just so toxic and cruel that it did the UK no favours. I, as a black woman born and raised in the UK, had already begun to feel so uncomfortable about the direction of travel in the UK towards anyone who was considered less than. And then the Brexit vote just put the final seal on my decision to make plans to leave the country of my birth, as I did not want to become vulnerable in my later years in the UK. When the Sussex miscarriage occurred, and the absolutely appalling content of media reporting about it, my plans began in earnest. The UK is becoming a place where it seems to go out of its way to alienate themselves from its neighbours, whether that be a family who live on the same street, or whole countries outside of Great Britain. The rhetoric in the media has been a drip effect on the incitement of hatred in the UK, and any unrest and reduction in quality of life or loss of life to vulnerable people in the UK will be as a direct result of UK media and their malicious intent. Due to the unwritten contract between the British royal family and UK media, it is quite clear that sanctions for this type of behaviour and business model comes from the top, i.e. government, aristocracy, UK media, printed and televised, police and the monarchy. If anything happens to any or all of the Sussexes, just know that all of those aforementioned groups will be the cause and will carry the blame. The introduction of the bot farms and the payments thereof is coming from somewhere. This is huge business. It is not the odd one or two. I am sure, just like the hate groups that have sprung up in their hierarchical structures at the very senior levels, it will be on a need-to-know basis as to who is at the top. There are groups out there who have their own idea as to who is at the top of such a structure and who is resourcing it. It is definitely not anyone poor, that is for certain. In the words of James Baldwin, anyone who has ever struggled with poverty knows how extremely expensive it is to be poor. End of quote. It is certainly not poor people who are funding the coordinated hate. Some poor people will create accounts to spread hatred and earn money from hate, which needs to stop, and penalties placed on social media platforms who profit from hatred, and likewise those hate account owners. Whoever is at the top of this empire that has grown up over the last 6 years is very rich indeed, and was very rich before all of this started. There are recognised researched reasons as to why someone becomes this obsessive about taking down another person. By any means, and like I have just said, this comes from a person who holds power and who feels threatened by the target in terms of popularity and their competence on a range of projects, whereas someone funding this coordinated hate is doing so out of jealousy and envy, and the fact that it makes the perceived power held by that individual means zero, when there is nothing to show for any endeavours over many decades, other than words written by someone else for the individual to read from, which is begging people to love and make them popular too. The ethnic origin of this target is a major factor, and I could write hundreds of articles about racial harassment and hate-filled crimes, but this podcast, in our usual Sussex Global UK style, looks into the layers that lie behind the activity and explore the motivation of each category mentioned above and how sinister it all is. It is important to mention here that whilst race is a major factor, racists dislike being called out for them having an aversion to people of colour occupying spaces deemed to be only acceptable for Caucasian people. In the majority of cases over the centuries, black people have been held back because they were rarely in positions of power to fight back. Black people over centuries have been denied decent education throughout the world, We have recently covered, in our SG UK community, a series on the transatlantic slavery trade, and all these centuries later we still have to raise the matter of reparation and global responsibility to rebuilding and encouraging economic growth in the places that were pillaged by Caucasian people, and where the world benefited from the slavery trade, not just those directly involved in the trafficking. Whole industries and trades and organisations emerged as part of the employment chain that grew from global genocide. What is it about people of colour that all those nations involved, or who benefited from that genocide, feared? The dislike of people of colour was clear, and that they were not regarded as sentient human beings. They were treated like expendable cargo, and if the ships were struggling with the poor weather conditions, the first things to be disposed of overboard were slaves. Without a thought, if any slaves were ill, they too were disposed of overboard. No time or money to worry about why they were sick. They were seen as a liability. Now, let's come to modern times, and the last 6 years in particular. What is it about people of colour that some white people dislike? No doubt it harks on the historical point of view that black people were seen as less than. An educated black person is seen as a threat. So history is well documented on how people of colour were held back from being given an education. It could be argued today that the situation still exists in a different format, but the aim is the same. In modern times, those attitudes still exist within some, but they are masked and labelled and masqueraded as something else. People of colour are not welcomed in all places, and there are definitely places in societal structures where people of colour cause some of the other people in the room to be a little uncomfortable. If it is clear that the person or people of colour are better educated and or high in intellectual in comparison to the privileged white people who occupy such spaces every day, without a care that others among them may be of similar high intellect, higher than most in the room, it becomes an issue for a few. It should be noted that attending very expensive schools and speaking with an accent that indicates that you come from wealth does not indicate intellect. There are obvious regular examples of members of the British royal family reading from their crib sheets in their identifiable accent and without any sense of understanding or empathy with what they are reading out. Accent and titles mean diddly squat in most spheres of life outside of the UK, and growing numbers in the UK are waking up to that fact now too. You see, white people generally don't have that much of a problem with someone who is not very bright. If it is a male, he will be accepted generally because he comes from money. If it is a female, she will probably be described as an airhead privately, and she may be whispered about that she's not quite top tier, but if her family has moved into top tier through business ventures, all that is ignored, and she is treated like one of the family. If, however, the family is not born into aristocracy, on the down low, the whole family will be considered not quite the ticket, but they will be accepted, particularly if the children of that family have attended the right types of schools, etc. No one in that space will be resentful. No one in that space will really object to them occupying that space. because they're not people of colour. In previous podcasts over the months, I have given examples of a number of organised group structures that have been used in research, global research, over the years. And in the article that goes with this podcast, there are 3 examples. For the podcast itself, I'm only going to talk about one in any kind of detail and show you my thoughts on where raw reporters or generally UK media fit on this model. There are a number of stages, and I make it clear, and it is my personal opinion, how many stages UK media occupy and who they incite by their behaviour to complete the other stages. So let's have a look at the escalation of online hate on social media platforms using, as I said, one model just to outline. As I said, we've discussed a few academic models to help explain certain actions, and these next 3 that are in the article and one that I'm going to speak about in the podcast outlines the process that was used in that research. I briefly summarise one of them now, and in my opinion, as I said, and I stress it is my personal opinion, I am using research data on the way the model escalates in nature and process, but I am stating here that I believe UK media groups are active in stages 1 to 4 of the 7 stages outlined here in respect of their approach and motives towards the abuse of Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. The incitement of hatred, which stems from those first 4 to 5 stages, is evident on a regular basis in the tabloid comment sections, as well as their partners within the monarchy on the social media accounts of the British royal family, and the quite telling evidence of the posts left standing for months and years, and others which are taken down almost immediately, or the comment sections closed completely if it relates to a different member of the royal family. Only Meghan's remains standing all the time. It is quite clear the message that is being sent and showing support for those who post such things. The shade of posting birthday wishes from the royal family accounts to Princess Meghan, but leaving all the vile comments there, says all it needs to say about the UK monarchy's lack of respect to a senior royal. Yet, as I said, they closed comment sections down for anticipated negative comments towards others in the family, mindful of their fragile egos. It is providing top-tier evidence for the future. So carry on. All these things are recorded now, so even if you remove or moderate, the evidence of the last 6 years is clear and noted. So, let's have a quick foray through this one example that I'm going to give, one of the models, but you'll see details on all 3 in the article. Stage 1. The haters gather. Not all insecure people are haters, but all haters are insecure people. Hate masks insecurities. The main groups which emerged very quickly in 2016 and have grown over the last 5+ years are as follows. Royal Rota, the media voice in the tabloids for the British royal family. Televised media, daily chat shows with invited panel guests spent criticising the Sussexes for not conforming to patterns of behaviour of the rest of the royal family for decades. Regarded as a failure in duty and therefore a traitor to the UK. Use emotional blackmail and language by saying it is an insult to the Queen who has given decades of service to the UK, etc., etc., etc. These daily shows always use the same phrases and discuss the same topics and the same couple in their anger. Other members of the British royal family are seen as innocent bystanders who are disappointed that this couple wish to be self-financing. Even a member of the family who was wanted by the FBI for credible reasons for questioning is protected by the royal family and the press and holds all the taxpayer-funded privileges, whereas the Sussexes were stripped of everything that was deemed important to royalists and was done out of vindictiveness and meant to hurt, and an attempt at coercive control or persuading Harry to return to the fold. Meghan and the children are only ever mentioned as a token gesture, or when the British royal family and its media are seeking photo opportunities which bring in much needed income, as so much of their once guaranteed income has moved to the USA and moved to USA media. Following the Sussexes being chased out of the UK and continually punished because they have not buckled under the pressure and returned to the abuse behind gilded gates. The UK dropped the bag of guaranteed income, and now they are petulant that their dangerous games did not work. Government is in this group. In stage 1, aristocracy, keyboard warriors, daily writing race and hate inciting posts on various social media platforms without challenge. Over the last 4 years or so, the numbers have grown. Or rather, it is clear that many individuals set up multiple accounts and post hateful things to give the impression that the number of people out there is high. The numbers are becoming dangerous because of the ripple effect of their social media content. A drip feed of race baiting. The recent investigation by Bot Sentinel revealed that a total of 83 accounts were responsible for 70% of the hate-filled tweets about the Sussexes, mainly Meghan. Some groups lose out by the Sussexes leaving, for example, the British royal family and the Royal Rota. Their mission is clear, and it is to protect that way of life that they had before Sussex independence. Like so many of these movements that develop, they are acting from a group perspective of selfish points of view. They are not concerned about the wishes of individuals. It is about serving the collective for the benefit of the groups which benefit from the current system. Anyone who attempts to change the order of things is targeted in order to make them conform. The monarchy is like a cult, something that people are born into and who have no say on what they wish to do with their lives. If the individual are high in the line of succession, they have next to no freedom of choice. The firstborn is everything and can do no wrong, and must be worshipped, and subsequent children are created purely to serve the firstborn. The official term used is to call them spares. Those children have no rights, but would have rights if they were born outside of the monarchy. No one is allowed to leave, and great pressure is placed on anyone who shows any signs of independent thought. This has been discussed in previous podcasts, and the history books are full of suffering of spares over the decades, and how royal life was like being a slave behind gilded gates, all funded by the UK taxpayer, who seem happy to do so, in order to have their figurehead family at the helm, which notionally represents stability and memories of the former British Empire. Stage 2. The hate group defines itself. Groups formed and were proudly declaring their views on the betrayal of their royal family, all setting up social media accounts on many platforms, proudly announcing they would defend this British way of life. The fact that Meghan was an American and an actress and a feminist and extremely wealthy, and the largest red flag for the majority was that she was a person of colour. Every heading represented factors that royalists could not tolerate, and the race element just sent racists over the edge that a person of colour was occupying space that was deemed for Caucasian people only. The fact that Meghan was wealthy in her own right, and was therefore not impressed by opulence and quality homes, because she could afford and did buy those things for herself over the years. No other royal bride had come into the firm with that level of wealth and intellect and strong feminist views. It was a bright red flag, and the race element was the final nail. All the various groups denied it was racism from the start. All these years later, those same groups have told on themselves so many times now. They have become a laughingstock on the global stage. A dangerous set of individuals who have been allowed to conduct themselves in such an extreme way and hide behind freedom of speech rhetoric, without acknowledging the harm to health and potential for loss of life along the way. This current set of groups are merely following in the practices over the course of history of removing or stopping freedom from the monarchy, and like those before, many of those groups are destroying themselves in their haste to destroy those who wish to leave. Those pressures are now being seen within some of those groups themselves. They are turning on each other. Stage 3. The hate group disparages the target. Hate is the glue that binds the haters to each other and to a common cause. By verbally debasing the object of their hate, haters enhance their self-esteem as well as their group status. Any verbal denigration, haters progress to the more acrimonious stage. The publications produced since 2016 have grown steadily worse in their content. Dangerous material, to say the least. We are well past the point where international legal bodies need to step in now. Looking at international intervention, many of the countries that attract interest contain people of colour, and also have limited financial means. Poverty is a key element. My thoughts on this are that abusive behaviour is not confined to people living in poverty. Abusers comprise of many societal income stratas. It is a huge error to ignore reports of abuse emanating from a place of opulence and privilege. There is an idea that wealthy people can afford legal assistance, so other people and nations are a priority. If this was not the case, why are the cases that I found in my research where the international legal community chose to become involved countries that were deeply affected by poverty? I have no issue with these communities receiving intervention by human rights organisations, but I am saying that adults and children have suffered and continue to suffer in places of wealth, and decades later a report is produced about the suffering. It is a bit late for those victims, and how many reports do we all need to see before someone grasps the nettle and gets involved when they hear of possible abuse going on in places now? Who speaks for the victims? Why are abusers ignored because they are wealthy and are friendly with other wealthy individuals? Who speaks up for the children who are deliberately brought into the world to serve others and to be foot soldiers for an institution, and told that they are not allowed to shine brighter than their older siblings, told that they can never leave, and that they are there as a duty to conform to rules that they never had any say in the first place, as well as no say that they were born into a particular family in the first place. Children outside of the royal bubble would have child protection agencies on the doorsteps of working class homes, yet the establishment families are left alone. It is beyond wrong, and it begs a question as to the role and terms of reference for international legal entities. Stage 4. The hate group taunts the target. To avoid introspection, haters increase the rhetoric and violence to maintain high levels of agitation. Taunts and offensive gestures serve that purpose. The daily drip effect of propaganda stories in the media, which then get fed around the world, add to the stress of the abused victims 24/7. It led to suicidal ideation for Meghan while she was pregnant with their son, and no one can tell me that this is acceptable just because you have funds. An average of 100 articles a day written about Harry and Meghan, none of it positive. The comment sections of these newspapers are full of hate, based on this daily feeding of the beast of hate. People have taken their own lives as a result of the UK tabloid press, and we should never forget the part UK media played in the abuse of Princess Diana and her eventual death in 1997. The same things is happening again with Meghan. Receipts exist of books written by media personnel over decades, which actually describe their plan of action, agreed by the British monarchy on how they would persuade and encourage positivity about certain members of the family via their publications, and they would equally use propaganda tactics to create the complete opposite for those deemed to be not abiding by the ethos and rules of the cult. Stage 5. The hate groups attack the target with weapons. This stage is critical, differentiates the vocally abusive to physically aggressive, for example, prowling the turf. Adrenaline increases, leads to provoking anger. Thoughts and actions leads to increased adrenaline. Anger builds on anger. All done by inciting hatred and negative behaviour in the general population to create an atmosphere of danger. Individuals have appeared here in the UK and abroad with dangerous intentions towards the couple. The cruelty during the first pregnancy of the Sussexes was shameful, and the reporting following the news of the miscarriage in the second pregnancy will forever be a stain on the UK and what it has become. Stage 6. The hate group utilises weapons. No reason to give details here, on this podcast or in the article. Everyone knows what that means. Stage 7. The hate groups destroys the target. The ultimate goal is to destroy the object of their hate. Mastery over life and death gives the hater a sense of self-worth and values, qualities which haters lack. The reality is that hate physically and psychologically destroys the hater as well as the hated. As I said, there are more details about that model and the research and 2 other models afterwards. And then towards the end of the article, you will see about the 7 stages of grief and where I believe the Raw reporters are on that spectrum as well. In fact, all the models you can see where UK media is, but that's just to give you an idea of what's in the article that I don't have time for to go through in this podcast. This section looks at a select group of people who go out of their way to lead a sizable portion of the citizens of a nation to harbour resentment, leading to damaging consequences and increase of harm to the target. In episode 41 of our podcast, I explored herd mentality and whether or not we are programmed to behave this way, and I discussed why people hate and what happens to our brains when we do. The differences and connections between love and hate. I have done a small amount of research on crowd psychology, whether it be physically together or via online platforms, and why and how people fall or move into group decisions on what and how they post. I also look in more detail in the article where we return to a topic that was touched on in a podcast from last year, comparing the similarities between the UK monarchy and a cult, where I have explored the psychology of propaganda and how it can manifest itself in everyday living as opposed to times of wartime conflict. Conflict is still present, and the intent to persuade groups of the population to believe and come to a preset conclusion is still at play in any society who is not immediately identified as being involved in a much wider game at play. The article goes into more detail about propaganda techniques and various specialists and researchers who have written papers over the years, and there are details, names, papers, dates and so on. But as a summary, in terms of this podcast, just looking at the techniques of propaganda in a list of bullet points. First one, name calling. Links person to a negative symbol in the hopes that the audience will reject the person or idea on the basis of that negative symbol, with no evidence. Card stacking. The use of statistics, often one-sided. It is biased because it leaves out important information that is crucial to drawing an informed conclusion. Glittering generalities. Name-calling in reverse seeks to make us approve and accept without examining evidence. Plain folks. Appeals to regular people. Bandwagon. Tries to convince audience that everyone else is doing it, so they should too. Transfer. Projecting positive or negative qualities onto a person to make the other seem more acceptable or discredit them. Fear. Disaster will result if the audience doesn't follow a particular course of action. Outside of those bullet points, just a general statement here about propaganda techniques. It is about swaying the opinion of the masses with words that manipulate, influence, and eventually win the point that you want them to make. A quote from one of the pieces of research which I said you will see in the article. This is regarding a propaganda model, and it was produced in 2018. The model does suggest that the mainstream media, as elite institutions, commonly frame news and allow debate only within the parameters of elite interests, and that where the elite is really concerned and unified, and or where ordinary citizens are not aware of their own stake in an issue, or are immobilized by effective propaganda, the media will serve elite interests uncompromisingly. Money and power can filter some of the information, allowing the government and politicians to spread their words to the public. The use of the experience of Meghan and Harry can be used as a very useful contribution to research. When we have national institutions in the UK, as one example, using terminology that is deemed offensive in terms of people of colour, and now has sunk so low to include descriptions of children who are not pure white, then as a nation we really are swimming in the toxic waste. As a result, when other groups do the same, then the general population who harbour such views of people of colour feel comfortable to air those views, and in most cases it goes without any real challenge. My views, and I stand by them, when those groups allow a couple to be put at risk in terms of health and safety, and a growing number of tangible death threats, along with the keyboard warriors who openly post death threats on various forums, then I strongly believe that international legal bodies need to step in. Remember, when the royal family, through its mouthpieces, the Royal Rota, tried to describe life outside of the royal bubble, as if it was like swimming in shark-infested waters. Life would be one without state banquets, and wearing tiaras and gowns, and people would curtsy to you, or vice versa, dependent upon the class system that exists in royal life, but nowhere else. A life of pretend, playing statesman or stateswoman, and have people bow and scrape to you to boost your ego. No child is prepared for a life outside earning their own coin. The royal plantation has just grown and grown on the backs of the UK people. A number of groups have grown out of that system, and now the system needs to be protected to preserve the way of life of a few. Hence the collective approach to stamping out any individual or group set up to bring about change and accountability, and for the public to have a say on whether or not a monarchy is viable in a modern society. The treatment of Harry and Meghan has provided evidence and learning points for the future. The Sussexes have made a new home for themselves in the USA, and they are pursuing their humanitarian projects on a global stage. No longer do they have to dim their lights in an effort to make the others look good, whilst the British royal family and pals in their various groups are spending more time trying to save their position in the monarchy from collapse than do anything tangible to help the UK and its growing poverty within its population. The Sussexes are mixing with global leaders, formulating real projects on the ground to help people. Harry and Meghan represent a modern monarchy, even though they have been stripped of all the things that appear to people living within that royal bubble. The Sussexes have proved titles and tiaras do not make the world sit up and take notice. Now the UK is starting to see self-inflicted damage they did to themselves, whilst Harry and Meghan are flying high. The moral of this story, and one which I think is becoming increasingly obvious to increasing numbers of people, that despite years of a propaganda campaign being in place, and the people who have come on board with its messages, increasing numbers of people are now beginning to question the purpose of the campaign and its duration. The world has major issues that need tackling, and to see a family and its powerful friends pursue a woman of colour and to put her and her children at risk because she was not a Stepford clone like all the other females in that family who are left alone is damaging to sensible people. The UK has lost a very valuable member of that family because he supports his wife 100% and no doubt feels deeply ashamed of the racism that is being completely evident by his family, despite it being wrapped up in the descriptions as part of the propaganda campaign. Media hosts were making public statements daily for Meghan to leave the UK and go back to the USA. The media spoke and wrote articles about the acting industry and Hollywood in particular in a very disparaging way, referred to black billionaires in similar terms, and showed no knowledge, did no research, and were so unprofessional in their rhetoric. Yet now members of the British royal family plan to visit the places that they have spent the last 5+ years describing negatively, using such words as ghetto, and referring to all wealthy people, all wealthy black people, I should say, as rappers, and even worse for those who work in the medium of television. The aim of propaganda is to influence people's opinions or behaviours actively, rather than merely to communicate the facts about something. The Sussexes' light will always be brighter than the rest of the family, because the British royal family refusal to read the room and move forward accordingly. Now the Sussexes are on another continent, and their light is shining even brighter. The royal reporters have always reported that the heirs should shine the brightest, and they should have the limelight, not someone way down the pecking order. The propaganda did not quite work out as the UK establishment planned. Yes, the UK has created a hostile environment for the Sussexes, in the same way that it has for all people of colour who wish to live in the UK. In fact, the most recent examples of the differences in response to white refugees and all the others who are people of colour is stark. Harry must be so ashamed and disappointed by his family. Well, the British royal family have the spotlight they crave for, and they have been found wanting. Over 5 years since Meghan was announced as being Harry's girlfriend, we still have one relative hell-bent on destroying this marriage, in the mistaken belief that Harry will return and be his footstool again. Have you all noticed that there has not been one project completed since Harry left Shutter Island? Not one. A few given high publicity by its propaganda team as making progress or about to start, but we have yet to see one tangible, measurable outcome that has made a difference to anyone. It's about the institution and the other societal groups mentioned earlier, and the effort put into maintaining the status quo, and the industry that has been created to destroy a couple who wanted to do things slightly differently. In the end, they were chased out of the country, and now the same groups of abusers have found that the firm is not faring so well, and it is not a temporary situation. None of the firm has put anything like the effort into looking at the state of the UK today and explored how the firm and its establishment groups could help. But the resources put forward trying to tear down a couple who are having a global impact with their work are seen as the enemy that must be destroyed. The USA is not a Commonwealth nation, and since the Sussexes now reside there and are doing well, we now have UK taxpayer funds going towards vanity projects which just so happen to take place in the USA near to where the Sussexes live. Yeah, right. What a coincidence. There is zero reason for the individual who is constantly incandescent with rage to be there, and that description is quoted in the UK media almost daily. It's time for the monarchy to focus on the country that they represent, in some shape or form, and then look to people in need elsewhere, and not use the colour of their skin to guide the interventions used. Public funds should not be paying for vanity projects of others who feel annoyed that they are not publicly adored because they are a future heir. Spend time as an institution finding ways to make yourselves useful to the country if you wish to remain as a monarchy, because at the moment it is not clear to a growing number of people. The level of hatred created towards the Sussexes, and Meghan in particular, falls at the British royal family's door. That is known the world over now, so it is going to take more than visits to places where you feel safe to talk about things that are not a priority for those countries, and places where you were not invited in the first place needs a rethink. The increase to the lives of the Sussex family has increased due to activity by the groups mentioned above, deliberately baited by UK media groups. Your hands are not clean just because you hide them behind your backs after you write the venom daily in the tabloids. It's like throwing stones. Interview the same problematic people on the TV, and now have encouraged groups within the population to set up hate groups online. And now the activity is moving into the physical realm, into those later stages of the models that I have referred to earlier. So, UK media, think on. You are doing what you do because you feel confident because of your ties to the monarchy. But trust me, when certain things hit the fan a few times, the media will be the first group to be thrown to the wolves, starting with raw reporters of colour, and then the less popular raw reporters who are not seen as in the pocket of the over-the-top adoration for their particular royal human. Newspaper barons will be the later groups to suffer for all of this discord. Plenty of people in the line who will be picked off one by one as the scandals continue to emerge. The number of legal processes breached in terms of the Sussexes, Meghan in particular, will one day be tackled legally, and not in a way that the raw reporters can get out of quickly or make money from. Doing what was done to a USA citizen on UK soil, and then continuing with targeting a USA family on their home soil, hiding behind the rhetoric of salacious reporting, hoping to get a response from the Sussexes to prolong the money gravy train. I won't say any more here. There are plenty of international legal specialists around, and plenty of cases of less well-known people that can be cited in similar actions elsewhere. Holding a UK press pass is worth little more than a badge to Clown College. That media cabal, both in newspapers and TV, will one day be given a rude awakening. People have died after long periods of harassment by UK media, and many others are still suffering the trauma of life post-case, even when they have been successful in their litigation. Individual reporters should be held responsible for the impact on their targets and no longer be able to hide behind the excuse that they are doing their job. Your endgame on the orders from above, take your pick who that may involve, is to destroy the target. And if that does not succeed, try to defame the individual. And if that does not succeed, then to target people who have worked with or who are due to work with the target, so that any business endeavours ultimately begin to fail, because the target will be seen as toxic. All of this to protect an institution with a history of questionable business activities and a history of preventing people from leaving. That is not a family. That is a cult. One of the pool of authors in favour of the royal family has recently written a book with the deliberate intention for the contents to be, and I quote him, "the downfall of the Sussexes," end quote. The same author publicly admitting that he wants them to sue him, clearly thinking of the money to be made in interviews and articles, and the opportunity to demand evidence of items of interest to the UK media industry, because at present the Sussexes do not work with Royal Rota, and therefore the UK have no access to the Sussexes, not even second or third hand, no access at all. UK media spend most of the year writing propaganda stating that Sussexes are not welcome in the UK, and the rest of the time writing articles stating it would be cruel to the Queen if they did not attend this or that. Prior to that, it would be cruel to Prince Philip. Basically, anyone who's not jumping around and in top health will be dragged into some ridiculous report or another to use in blaming Harry or Meghan in some way for the state of their health. An important point here. Every time UK media disrespect or commit a crime against the Sussexes, you are inflicting the same injury onto every person of colour and all sane people with a moral code as well. So think on. You are not only hurting your targets, but millions around the world too. When the British royal family invite themselves to other countries using some excuse or another, just remember, anywhere there are people of colour, you won't have many supporters there happy to see any member of that family, whilst others are committing crimes and nothing is done because they are royal. Your endgame is to destroy anyone who tries to leave the cult, because they cannot be seen to succeed outside of the plantation. Any harm comes to any member of that family, just know that the world is watching, and the response will be quick and damaging for you. UK media are active in the earlier stages of all the models quoted in many episodes of this podcast channel, and the latter stages are encouraged via the propaganda and the incitement of hate generated. Whatever happens in the later stages, if at all, will be held at the door of UK media and the monarchy for allowing it to occur to a member of the British royal family who happens to be a person of colour and outspoken and of high intellect, whilst finding vast sums of money to protect other members of the royal family from the arms of the law. The end game is very clear, and those from Clown College provide receipts daily, all building to be cited as evidence one day via a legal system or via history books. The global support network is vast and contains a wide range of skills, and protection is available because of those skills. Sussex success is and will remain inevitable. That's the end of this week's podcast. Once again, I apologise that I've gone over beyond an hour, but hopefully you'll find it interesting, and trust me, there are a number of reference sources listed at the end of the article that I have not even been able to talk about today. I've included some of them in the article, but then the article itself would be even longer than the 25 pages it currently is. So look at those in your leisure should you wish to know more. As usual, speak to you in the comments, and I'll be on air again next Sunday. Bye for now. Bye from Ivy. Bye.